everyone. I'm Kenny Rice, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. We're on episode number 47. We'd like to thank everyone for tuning in on the YouTube channel, and thanks also for listening to us on iHeart, Stitcher, 93.9 in Louisville, Kentucky, iTunes, Google Play, and we're delighted to welcome in some good friends of mine over the years, WVLK Radio in Lexington, Kentucky, now joining our growing network, and WVLK in the heart of horse racing country. That's right. As people in Kentucky will say. With me again on lead guitar, Scott Hall.
Hey, how you doing, Kenny?
Ben Chaffins on bass.
How's it going, Kenny?
And our researcher, Mr. Thomas Kenny.
I'm back.
You're back. And where were you last week? Took a break, rest up, long Thanksgiving?
I got up, and I was ready to go, and I just fell ill.
Okay. Well, thankfully, we're all healthy today, and we're all back. We have a great show today. Talk about care. We're going to talk about aftercare for thoroughbreds. Now, we obviously know Justify, American Pharoah, the big names. They're living a good life, as they should. They're bringing in millions of dollars to the farms. So they're pampered, and they're catered to, and they're taken care of. But there's the majority of racehorses out there, not a lot, but a majority of racehorses that are not always taken care of. That's where the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance comes in. It is a benevolent nonprofit association that gives grants to those that are taking care of retired racehorses, giving them a better life. John Phillips from Darby Dan Farm will join us. We'll talk about that. He's the past president. One of my favorite writers out there is Dick Jerardi. Used to be with the Philadelphia Inquirer, now the Philadelphia Daily News. He covers basketball. He covers horse racing, two of my all-time favorite sports. So we'll be talking with Dick Jerardi later on. John Phillips also has a Pittsburgh Pirate tie-in. So on the typical horse racing show, we're getting baseball, basketball, horse racing. What else do you want?
Hey, it sounds good to me.
That work for you guys?
That works.
That sounds great.
Thoroughbred Alliance right now, they got, we're talking about the aftercare, not to be confused with the new Thoroughbred Coalition, which is kind of off and sort of running, but still, kind of getting their feet under them.
Yeah, they haven't made any, I guess what you would call major steps yet, but, here and there, they're kind of figuring things out, getting their feet wet, so to speak.
And again, it's something that racing needs. We've talked it, and we know what a bad year it's been. And maybe the Aftercare Alliance is helping kind of bring some positive energy to horse racing. We'll talk to John Phillips about that when we come back. Thank you for tuning in to the Horse Racing Show. Much more to come right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in on one of the many media outlets that we are on. I'm Kenny Rice. Delighted to have this man with us from Darby Dan Farm, John Phillips, who is also the past president of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. We were speaking earlier in the show about we know where some of the big horses go and they have a great life as stud and they're pampered, but there are many others out there, John, that aren't, and I guess that's where Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance steps in.
Correct. Well, so it's a national effort all across the country. The Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance basically is an accrediting body and a funding body. And we have now up to 74 organizations that have over 170 facilities. And these are mostly horses that are getting a soft landing as they come out of racing. They're either going to be essentially in a retirement home if they're not capable of going on for some sort of further activity, or, and of course is our greatest emphasis, retraining to be dressage horses, hunter jumpers, field horses, trail horses, and that sort of thing. And it's a huge effort. We commit the industry commits about $4 million a year to support these 170 plus organizations, and it's growing every year.
Some people will say that most people tuning into this show obviously follow horse racing. But we do get some emails, and I get some questions. Hey, I'm a fan of sports, and I kind of occasionally tune in, and I like horse racing, but I'm not a horse racing guy necessarily. They might think that there's just everybody's rich in horse racing, so why aren't all these horses just automatically taken care of?
Well, I think that was a rhetorical question because obviously everybody isn't rich.
I know.
In horse racing, there's a huge industry, tremendous. The big operations get all the attention, and and they should. I mean, they've invested huge capital. It's an art form, and that's what people need to appreciate about horse racing. It's a sport, yes, it's a business, but it's also an art, and it's living art. Mm-hmm. And if you go to any of the farms here in Kentucky through horse country, which are accessible now, it's a beautiful, beautiful landscape, and it's well worth seeing. It's maybe not a mountain and maybe not a seashore, but it is absolutely breathtaking. So they do get the big guys do get a lot of attention, and their facilities are amazing. But it's also a huge industry here, and there's a tremendous number of mom and pop, what you could call mom and pop or small businesses here. I mean, we raise, 12,000 foals here in central Kentucky. And if you think about it, central Kentucky being the epicenter of the world market, will do over $1 billion worth of horse sales in Fayette County alone this year. That's a huge industry. And 1 in 11 people employed, either directly or indirectly, do so as a result of our sport. So it has a massive economic impact. And whether you're, have 3 or 4 mares sort of on your small hobby farm, or whether you have 40 or 50 that are just a commercially based for clients throughout the world, or whether you're one of the super big guys, it has a lot of vertical economic impact.
And one thing, no matter what sport you follow or if you're casually into it, I think horses are kind of like dogs. Everybody loves them, I mean, they want everybody to be happy and healthy, pretty much across the board.
Well, so let's talk about that for a second, because I think that's an interesting thing, and it ties into aftercare. There was a period in American history where horses were pretty much utility animals. They were livestock. That has transitioned, and so now, while in Arizona or Texas or Louisiana, you still may have that attitude, cultural attitude, that they're livestock. On the other hand, in places like California, New York, and perhaps Kentucky, they've elevated themselves, horses, the relationship with horses has elevated itself to that of a companion animal, really, as you say, like a dog. But the important thing, and this is what I tell people all the time with regard to aftercare, look, I don't care what your personal values are, and I say this to horsemen all the time. And I'm really not here to judge your personal values, but what we do know as a sport and as an industry is that the attitudes of American people overall have changed. And they require 2 things. They require really safety of animals, which has really come to the fore out in Santa Anita.
Right.
And they require an aftercare of animals, that these are not commodities that you just use and then throw away. And those are the 2 underbellies which we see a massive transition going on in the sport. I'm focused on the aftercare side because it's something that I just have gotten into. Many farms, Darby Dan, for example, will have a pension field, and we might have a dozen horses out there that that have lived out their useful life as competitive animals or as reproductive animals. But that's a luxury that we can afford at Darby Dan, and not everybody can. So we have this whole aftercare industry, essentially, that we're supporting. We're making sure they're doing it right, which is the accreditation process, which is very, very extensive. And then we have a retraining aspect to that, as I've said, which is also extremely important, and making sure that those horses coming out of the industry have a soft landing.
We're talking with John Phillips, Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance past president, still very active in it at Darby Dan Farm. Like you said, you have retired horses that are standing out there. Is there a ballpark figure what it costs for people that are interested in the Alliance and wanting to get involved? Is there kind of a ballpark figure out there what it costs to keep an old horse up on a farm, for a year?
We have done some calculations in that regard, and it's somewhere in the neighborhood, and of course it depends a lot on the area. California is so different from Kentucky, but it'll be in this state, it'll be say $3,000 to $5,000 just basic maintenance, just to feed and clean water and bedding and that sort of thing. So that does bring up a point, though, that right now, to produce a thoroughbred, to breed a thoroughbred, there's $50 for every foal that's dropped. $50 is going to head to his aftercare. $25 will come out of the registration fee, and $25 will come all from the Jockey Club, will come from the report on mares bred. So every mare that gets bred, a $25 fee will be directed to an aftercare through the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, and $25 of every horse thoroughbred registered will go to it. So we start with, automatically, we'll start with $50, and then you can do your actuarial tables and the like, because obviously a lot of horses come back into the breeding operation. A lot of horses automatically go to other areas of endeavor, cross-country shows, backyard riding, that sort of thing.
Now, if someone's listening or watching us on YouTube right now or listening to this show, and they say, I love horse racing. I'm not really familiar with thoroughbred aftercare. I want to donate some money. Easy to do?
It's very easy to do. There are tons of small organizations, and we have several of them here in Central Kentucky that are very, very good. You can just look up thoroughbredaftercare.org, and you can come into the Alliance. The Alliance, as I say, supports 75 organizations. We divvy up a little over $3.5 million a year to supplement those organizations. We have some wonderful organizations here locally. New Vocations is a classic.
Right.
Old Friends is a really great organization that's very fun to go out and visit. So, yeah, it takes nominal research to be able to find some place that'll enjoy your money.
Yeah, you figure $25, $50, everybody maybe,
I
sound like I'm doing a telethon now, don't I?
Very, very good, and we'll take that. But it's very important. It really is for the industry to address this. And we've done tremendously well in the last 10 years, but we have a long way to go still. There are areas of concern. You get to Louisiana and West Virginia and some of the lesser, more modest jurisdictions, and there are some issues. Now, we don't have horse slaughter in this country, but there is a real issue of the kind of transportation that animals get to go to Canada or Mexico, and it's a real concern for us. And we're evolving. We're developing more sophisticated triage abilities at the various racetracks, and there are other organizations such as Cantor that helps distribute horses. It's kind of a listing service for people that are looking for horses. And then I think, too, as an industry, we've got to get better at identifying horses before their last race. It's so much easier to retrain and repurpose horses than it is to take care of them for 15 more years after their athletic career's done. It's much more efficient. And so we're working on that. That's all evolving. But we've come a long, long way in the last 10 years on this issue.
It's a wonderful organization, Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. We'll check on that. Please do. You can go at .org. It's pretty simple to look it up. When we come back, we're going to talk more with our guest, John Phillips. Baseball? Why would we talk baseball? You probably already know it if you're an avid horse fan. If you're a baseball fan, you got to stay tuned to this. More coming up here on The Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show, episode 47, by the way. Thanks to all of you who've listened to all 46 prior to this. I'm Kenny Rice. With me is John Phillips of Darby Dan Farm, past president of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. We've been talking about the care of thoroughbreds after their racing days. Most of those are not stars, as in life. There's only a few stars out there. John, when you look at racing today, I think Aftercare Alliance more than ever needs to be promoted, given it's not been the best of years, obviously, for horse racing.
It's been a real tragic year for horse racing as a sport. Few people appreciate how much and to what degree people that are in the sport really love the animal, and that I think is maybe one of the most adverse things that's happened, is that there's a perception out there that we treat them like a commodity and that we really don't care. And I will tell you as firmly as I can that just simply is not true. I always am telling the folks that I'm privileged to work with at the farm, if you want to be wealthy, don't do what you're doing now. But if you want to enjoy life and enjoy the process, the cycles of life, raising thoroughbreds and being a part of this sport is glorious and very fulfilling. It's beautiful.
I want to ask you about Darby Dan. Great history in the sport. Your grandfather, the legendary John Galbraith, gets us started, and Darby Dan with Shadow Gay, Proud Clarion, Little Current. I got to write them all down because I'll miss somebody. Okay? I mean, what a legacy that your dad and you have continued on at Darby Dan.
It has been a tremendous ride, and we've been very fortunate. You know, we've been lucky to associate with the right people throughout the decades, and it's been a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but the family has always enjoyed the outdoors. The family has always enjoyed horses, and so it's not really... well, it's work, but it's a labor of love. Let's put it that way, and has been for decades.
And a real credit is you don't see all this generational farm. Not many. There's several, okay, but not as many as there used to be.
That's true. I mean, there's only a handful of us left.
I can name them, pretty much all of them.
Yeah,
actually.
You can pretty much name them on one hand, and that makes it special because it's not just the land. It's really the generations of horses that live side by side with the generation of the family members. So, you know, the folks that I work with at the farm, they laugh at me because I'm sitting there saying, oh, I remember the Grand-Am and the great-Grand-Am, as I used to laugh at my grandfather remembering the dam and the great-Grand-Am and thinking, boy, this guy's old.
But now, how many people could have sat down like you did with the legendary John Galbraith and say, yeah, I remember Proud Clarion, and I also remember Roberto Clemente, because your grandfather owned the Pittsburgh Pirates and really the glory days, I think 3 World Series, right?
Correct.
60, 71, 79.
No, you're right on.
Good. I didn't have to look at that.
Those were great times, too. And I mean, you know, it's kind of interesting because we combined both baseball and horse racing together. And we went in the 60s, and we used to invite the entire team to come when they had a AAA affiliation in Columbus.
Columbus, the Clippers.
Well, it was actually the Jets.
The Clippers, the Jets. That's right.
Actually, the Jets.
Yeah.
And they used to come and play this exhibition game every year, and then they used to come out to the farm, and we used to have a lot of fun showing the entire team the horses, and they thought it was great. And you know, as that transpired over the years, we began to name horses to honor various players in the Pittsburgh Pirates, which was our team for many years. Names like Hail the Pirates and Our Captain Willie, and of course probably the most famous one was Roberto.
We're talking with John Phillips, Darby Dan Farm. We've been talking about Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance. Please support that. But get back to this baseball because Roberto Epson Darby winner. Wow, I'm trying to think of another athlete who had a horse. A horse was named for that had the success of Roberto. Very few out there.
I can't really remember.
I can't think of
not
one.
To that height. That was an interesting thing because Roberto Clemente was he was a fascinating and beautiful human being. He was a great baseball player, so right. Everybody knows that, acknowledges that, and he was hard to sort of understand for the family, for my grandfather, for my father. He was very humble. He was very dedicated to his heritage, which was both African American and Puerto Rican. So he spoke almost no English when he first came up. And yet there was something about him. A tremendously gifted athlete, just beautiful, graceful athlete. But he always spoke of Puerto Rico and children in Puerto Rico and how he grew up very poor. he never forgot about that. And for a while, you just begin to think, well, that's just sort of his shtick. But as you got to know him, it wasn't a shtick at all. He was genuinely concerned about humanity, and in particular, Latin America and Hispanics.
And his impact still felt. John Velasquez, the Hall of Fame jockey, who's from Roberto Clemente's hometown, still wears number 21 on his helmet. I didn't find that out till this year, by the way, John. As many times as I've talked to Velasquez,
I never knew that. So when I see Johnny, I
found that out this year. Yeah, we were doing a show up in New York, and I noticed on the helmet, and he first told me about it. He said he's from the same hometown in Puerto Rico.
Well, Roberto Clemente was a hero, and it's so sad that he passed away, because I'm sure he would have entered politics and would have been a great representative for Puerto Rico and frankly for the country, for all America. He was genuinely interested in the welfare of his fellow man. And sadly, of course, he died on December 31st while we were all getting ready to go to a New Year's Eve party. He was worried about relief supplies going to Managua, Nicaragua, and had heard that the Army had seized his previous flight and for the black market, and they were being stolen essentially away from the people for which they were intended. So he boarded the next plane to make sure that wouldn't happen, and the plane went down, and he was lost and his body never found. And, of course, he's the first baseball player ever to have been the 5-year waiting period to have been waived, and he was inducted into the Hall of Fame immediately. And Vera, his good wife, just passed away about 3 weeks ago.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he never got to see Roberto the horse.
Right.
Although he was very well aware of it. And had he lived into 1973, he was made a commitment to come down and see the horse. And he and the family had a great relationship by that time. And, of course, it was tough in the 60s.
Yeah.
There was... People can't imagine what the world was like, and I feel great sympathy for the African-American athletes in particular that came through. Even I, back in the late 50s, early 60s, remember going to Fort Myers and seeing colored bathrooms and not understanding what colored and white. I didn't understand segregation being in Ohio, and weren't familiar with that concept really in any overt way, certainly. And so it was tough for those ball players, Willie Stargills and all those guys that came up and played great in the 60s and in the 70s. We can't appreciate how different it was then. And I have tremendous respect for that process that they went through.
That's why I love this show. If I can be a little self-serving here.
Sure.
To talk about things like this, which I think crosses over, which horse racing needs to do a little more, and realize that there's a lot of great sportsmen out there, like your grandfather, John Galbraith, like you are, Mr. John Phillips, and continued success at Darby Dan.
Thank you very much.
I may come out and look at that trophy one day.
I wish you would. Trophy. We'd have fun.
Yeah, and please check out and support the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance for all the wonderful work that's done in the industry that acknowledges the horses that didn't become the stars, didn't become the great stallions, but still are very much appreciated and cared for. John, come back.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk more Darby Dan, and we'll talk more baseball anytime.
A lot of fun.
All right, stay with us. More coming up. You're listening to The Horse Racing Show. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show, episode number 47. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you're joining us, and happy to add to it along with iHeartRadio and Stitcher 93.9 in Louisville, WVLK Radio in Lexington, Kentucky, the heart of horse racing, as they say in Kentucky. And what else, Thomas, Kenny? Everywhere. We're all over the place. This guy's all over the place. I've run into him at basketball arenas and at horse racing tracks, and he covers them outstandingly. You might have read him in the Philadelphia Inquirer, now in the Philadelphia Daily News, sometimes in the racing form, on TV. Ubiquitous Dick Jerardi joins us. Dick, welcome in.
Thanks, Kenny. How are you doing?
How's that introduction, okay?
Perfect, man. Doesn't get any better than that.
You're on your way back, I understand, right now. You saw Penn State pull the upset of Maryland last night.
I did. I'm on the radio team. I'm the analyst for Penn State basketball. I've been doing it for 16 years, and I did see it. And I can tell people out there this is the best Penn State team in my time doing it by far. They're really good.
And, that's what I love about basketball is the way momentum can change and big swings in a game and, 14-2 runs and things like that. That's what I love about the sport, how it can instantly change around.
No question. And it's interesting. Penn State this year, for the most part, has made their momentum swings really early in the games. They've jumped teams, and teams just haven't been able to come back. And that's exactly what they did to Maryland last night.
It's not good being undefeated right now, is it? I mean, I'm looking at Duke and Kentucky, and number 1 Louisville loses last night, and number 4 Maryland loses last night. Butler loses last night. It's tough at the top or near the top.
Yeah, good luck to anybody in early December trying to pick a Final Four or a national champion. I've actually gotten to the point the last, I'd say, 10 years or so. I certainly pay attention to the games early, but I really start paying attention on February 1st because that's when you're going to really see the teams that are going to be playing in March.
I think you're right. And, with a few exceptions, sometimes you see a team that's going to be really good. Recently, like Villanova, the second time around especially, I think you looked and said, hey, this team's going to be really good. Keep an eye on them. But I'd like it a lot when people get excited about December basketball. To me, it's like that 2-year-old that has a big race in midsummer. Okay, they might still be around in the fall. They might rarely be around when we start talking about the Derby Trail.
It's my horse racing training that actually got me, Kenny, to start realizing the same thing with college basketball. Your analogy is 100% correct. There's very few teams that I've been able to see in November or December and say, hey, they're going to win it all. One I can tell you about, I saw the Anthony Davis Kentucky team.
Yeah.
Penn State's third game that season was up at Mohegan Sun against Kentucky. I said to my partner, I said, we'll be seeing them in April cutting down some nets. You could tell how good they were.
Yeah, and that's one of the few one and I'm not a big one and done fan. Kentucky did it because of Davis. Way back in the day, Syracuse did it with Carmelo Anthony. Duke did it with the trio of freshmen that they had in not too long ago. But this one and done, Dick, I like a team like a Penn State. I like these teams at Butler, got a nice team this year that have guys that stay around.
No question. It's interesting. Penn State, for the first time since Coach Chambers has been there, their 2 best players are seniors. And anybody watched the game against Maryland, Mike Watkins, the shot blocker, is going to be the second all-time leading shot blocker in school history. And Lamar Stevens is probably going to end up being the all-time leading scorer. So, yeah, when you have really, really good seniors, that's what plays in March and April, no question.
I think it's a lot like trainers. Some guys, to keep a look at every year, they're going to be in the mix. Like, you look at certain coaches every year, they're going to have a team that's going to be ready. We're talking with Dick Jerardi, by the way, Philadelphia News, many other outlets. He's on the Penn State network, basketball network as well. But, you've got, Baffert, Pletcher coming in, Chad Brown, they're going to come in. There's some coaches coming in. But then you have these guys coming up, like at Penn State and some other places where you go, well, they got something to look at. Texas Tech, they've got something to look at. That's what I like is when the new blood comes into the game, either game.
Absolutely. Yeah, no doubt about it. And it is fascinating. I mean, Chad Brown was kind of an unknown in horse racing even 10 years ago. Now he's the dominant trainer. My analogy for him would be Brad Stevens. When he started at Butler, I remember watching him, Kenny. I was down in Birmingham with St. Joe's one year. This has got to be, 07, maybe about 12 years ago in the NCAA tournament. And they were playing Oklahoma at night. So I went over to watch the afternoon games. And it's the first time I'd ever seen Brad Stevens. And I said to a couple of friends of mine, I said, look, I don't know how this is going to end, but man, is this guy cool on the sidelines. And boy, does his team play beautiful basketball. Never knowing, of course, they'd be in the national championship game 2 years in a row, which is one of the great feats in the history of college basketball.
I remember one of the last times I saw you at a gym, it was my pleasure to be at the Palestra. I love like going to, going to old racetracks. And, obviously you talk about like Saratoga or some of the history of there, Churchill with the Derby, all that history. But to go to old gyms or old stadiums, I love that. And I was fortunate. I was calling the College Basketball Invitational back then. And I did a game at the Palestra one night. I saw you up there. We're doing a Penn game. And then the next night, I'm actually in it was not a great year for Butler. They were playing Pittsburgh when Dixon was still coaching Pittsburgh, and they played the game at Hinkle Fieldhouse in Indianapolis where Butler plays. So to go to those 2 venues back-to-back nights, I just love the whole atmosphere.
Yeah, that's impressive. Those are two of the great gyms. You and I should have a contest one day, Kenny. See who's been in more gyms to see college basketball games. I'm up to about 170 now. I put together my list a couple of years ago, and the Palestra, of course, if anybody ever gets to Philly, that is absolutely, it's on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania, but at one time, all the Big Five schools, St. Joseph, South Villanova, Temple, and Penn played almost all their games in there. It's such a cool place, as Kenny said, to watch a game. If you're my other favorite is Allen Fieldhouse at Kansas.
Yeah.
The Palestra is basically Allen Fieldhouse in half. They don't have an upper deck, but it's just such a great place. And yeah, Kinkle is. I've seen some games there. What a neat place that is in Indianapolis.
You got me beat by about 50 gyms, I think.
Okay. Well, you know, when I whooshed by everybody is when I started doing this Penn State thing, because I'd kind of maxed out all the gyms for the Philly teams. I'd been in just about everywhere in the Northeast. But yeah, now all of a sudden I'm going to places in the Big Ten, and yeah, that's definitely helped my agenda for gyms.
Dick Jerardi is our guest. We're talking a lot about basketball, obviously, right now, but you cover horse racing so extensively and so well, and I guess that's where we first met at a racetrack many years ago. And isn't it great that we still talk to people and they still talk to us? You know, that's nice.
That is nice, Kenny.
That's
nice.
It's
a great thing.
But
People always ask me, what's your favorite sport to cover? And I always tell them it's horse racing because I love the people at the racetrack.
And, you know, and there's so many layers, as you know, with every story. I mean, my goodness, you've written thousands of stories. So, you know, you got the owner, the trainer, the breeder, the jockey, the horse itself. I mean, there's just so many layers to the sport. That's what intrigued me when I first started covering horse racing.
No doubt. And, you know, when I first got into it, I got into it as a player more so than a writer. I was a journalism major at the University of Maryland. But I first got to the track. Some guys introduced me to it that I played poker with at college. And I said, man, this is cool. And that's kind of how I learned the history of the game. And then I got into it. I didn't grow up with it. Then I got into it to cover it just because it just was so fascinating. Because it's just not like any other sport. You know, I don't have to tell you that, Kenny, but the people are so happy to talk to you, and and there are stories out there. I mean, you can't make up stories like Smarty Jones. I mean, that was an awesome story to have. It's a 15-year anniversary, and we had Smarty Jones come back to Parks to parade around the racetrack right around on Labor Day this year, and it was awesome. And just the feeling that horses engender in people and just the stories behind them, nothing like the racetrack.
Nothing at all. We're going to talk more basketball, horse racing, and whatever else we want to with my friend Dick Jerardi when we come back here on the Horse Racing Show. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in, listening to us on one of the many media outlets that we're now proud to be a part of. Happy to catch up with a longtime friend, Dick Jerardi. Writes now for the Philadelphia News, used to write for the Inquirer. You probably read him in the Racing Form or other publications, or maybe you curse him because you've tried to go head-to-head with him in a handicapping contest like the recent Breeders' Cup, and he has beaten you. Dick Jerardi, our guest. Good job, by the way, in the Breeders' Cup handicapping contest.
I appreciate that, Kenny. I mean, it's my favorite contest to play, and I play in a bunch, but I really like the live money contest because it more emulates what you're doing at the track every day when you're out there playing. And yeah, I hit a big one in the second to last race, that Breeders' Cup turf. I had a Brixton Mortar over a 50-1 shot and cashed out pretty good in the exacta.
And is there a key to this? Because you've done so well with handicapping tournaments. I know a lot of handicappers listen to us, and guys that, play either serious or, for fun, some casual tournaments. Is there a key to being a good tournament player?
Yeah, I think you have to approach it differently, first of all, from the regular racetrack day. And the one thing I tell people, you got to have a money goal. What are you trying to get to? And have a plan. Typically what I do is I try to, whatever the entry fee is for the contest, I try to get to 10 times what the entry fee is. So in that contest, it's $10,000 to get in the Breeders' Cup contest. So I'm trying to get to 100,000 and then see what that does. So you got to have a plan to get there. And typically you got to have multiple plans because everything's not going to work out. You better be having audibles. And it was interesting, the turf race was actually, I think, about the fourth or fifth chance I had to get to 100. But I planned it out that way that I would have enough money to make a certain amount of bets that if any one of them hit, I could get there. And the other thing is you got to fire, Kenny. You can't be scared. You just got to go. If you're scared, you probably shouldn't be playing. And it's fun. I like competing, and that's really competition. You know, none of us are playing anymore, but that's kind of like playing. And a real good buddy of mine, Ray Tannehill, and I won the World Series of Handicapping at Penn National way back in 1993. We also finished second and third, and he's really the guy who helped me through contests. Sadly, he passed away in 2015, but I definitely, anything I do is in his memory and with him anytime I'm playing a contest.
Oh, that's wonderful. And, you know, Dick, and like you say, it's like basketball. If you go in there and you see the opponent has fear in his eyes, the coach looks a little shaky before the game. You know, if you could get something down quickly in Vegas, you're going the other way.
No doubt. I mean, the bet that I hit on, I had a $2,000 cold exacta in the Breeders' Cup turf. And there's not a lot of people that are willing to make that bet. That's just kind of how I've always played. And when I mapped it out, again, I had like, I think 4 or 5 different races that I was trying to hit something big on. You just got to believe in what you believe in. And if you have a conviction, don't back off. Just go for it. And as I said to somebody, said, well, what would have happened if it came the other way or you didn't hit? I said, I still got on the plane the next day and come home. Wasn't going to change anything.
Dick, is it Bricks and Mortar the horse of the year? We talked about him winning.
Yeah, I think so. 5 grade ones, all different racetracks, never lost, won the biggest turf race of the year. I mean, it was such an oddball year, Kenny, in that we didn't have like a superstar older horse like we've had in recent years. Yeah. No Gun Runner, no California Chrome. We did not have a Triple Crown winner, which is crazy, but we've had 2 of them. And recently, when it was obvious. So then you have to go somewhere else and you say, well, who was consistently great all year? The answer is Bricks and Mortar. I think Matoli will get votes, and I think he should get votes. And I think he can certainly make a case for the Derby winner for 20 minutes to get some votes too, because he just had a phenomenal year. There's no doubt that he'll be the 3-year-old champ, but I'm not sure he's quite got the resume to be horse of the year because he technically obviously didn't win any of the 3 Triple Crown races.
Yeah, and I think had he run in one of those Triple Crown races, I think
the
maximum security.
Yeah,
if you'd have run in, say, the Belmont, okay, I know they're all ticked off and they're going to miss. If you'd have run in that and tried to be groomed to run in the Jockey Club Gold Cup or maybe then go on to the Breeders' Cup, he gets a lot more attention, right? You know, I know he's winning, but he's not winning the races that everybody sees.
No doubt, and I think that was the intention was after they skipped the rest of the Triple Crown, they got him ready to run in the Haskell where he was terrific. Then they were going to run him in the Pennsylvania Derby and then go to the Breeders' Cup Classic. And if you remember, Kenny, he got the colic the week of the Pennsylvania Derby. He would have won that race for sure, given how the race was run. And if he'd have come back after that and won the Breeders' Cup Classic, then he would have been the horse of the year. That would have been sufficient. He would have knocked out Bricks and Mortar, even though Bricks and Mortar had that great year, because the reality is we typically, when you have a dirt horse who's had a great year, that's going to be your horse of the year.
Dick Jerardi, who's the 2-year-old of the year? That's a wacky year, isn't it? I mean, especially with that bomb that comes in, and you know, who's gonna win this now? I don't know.
I have no clue. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I was trying to think about that the other day, and I said, you know what? I'm not thinking about this. It's too confusing. Yeah, the bomb that wins the Breeders' Cup, whose name escapes me at the moment, you were thinking
Storm the Court.
Storm the Court. There we go.
Yeah.
You were thinking that maybe the horse that's going to get the Barclay Tag horse is going to get and win the Kentucky Jockey Club, but he runs third. So yeah, there's no vote that you're going to feel real comfortable about voting for the 2-year-old champ this year. Yeah. Good luck trying to make a future book bet on the Derby right now. I got no clue.
I tell you, there's going to be some odds on that, isn't there?
Yeah, if you're right, you can make a bunch. And we'll never have one like 2 years ago when they were offering 40-1 on Justify after he broke his base. Well, oh my Lord, that's my only ever future book cash. But 40-1. I love this story too. By the way, after his next start, I texted Bob Baffert. I said, Bobby got it, whatever this buyer figure was. I said, no pressure, but I got him at 40-1. Bob texts me back and he says, yeah, and I got him at 300-1. He knew.
Proving once again that Bob Baffert and Dick Jerardi know their horses.
No, he knows better than me. I got to wait for him to run a little bit first.
Yeah, the Baffert thing's just phenomenal. We talk about him almost every other week on this show. Somebody brings him up like I am now. But he's kind of like, he's kind of like Krzyzewski out there. To me, every year, there's always that possibility. And I think every year Duke is always that possibility on the court.
Nah, it's a great comparison. I mean, the fact that he's won 2 Triple Crowns and wasn't all that far from winning like 3 more.
Yeah.
I mean, Point Given was unlucky in the Derby. He just got caught up in that hot pace. And obviously, he had real quiet misses winning the Triple Crown by an inch. It's amazing. He could literally have had 5 Triple Crowns in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I think if you go, let's see, a length of a horse, roughly about 1/5 of a second. So if you look at how Silver Charm just barely lost less than a length, and real quiet in less than a second, Bob Baffert could have had 2 more Triple Crowns.
Absolutely,
and you're right. Point Given was the best horse that year, just a bad Derby.
No question. No, it was just one of those. It happens in horse racing. We see it all the time where the circumstance overtakes talent, and things happen inside races that compromise the best horse. And that's what happened that day. But yeah, I actually think that Point Given was as good as any of the 3-year-olds he's ever had, including his 2 Triple Crown winners.
Wow. You know what? I cannot argue that point. I did too. I thought he was a Triple Crown winner.
Yep. Yeah. One of my great.
Going into it, I thought he could.
Yeah, you'll love this one too, Kenny. The day before that Derby, Point Given's Derby, my lead to my column was Point Given is going to win the Triple Crown. Well, my lead to my post-Derby story was Point Given is not going to win the Triple Crown.
Oh, that's why you are one of the best, my friend. Dick, I really appreciate you being on. Please come back.
Absolutely. Anytime, Kenny.
You can read him in the Philadelphia Daily News, listen to him on the Penn State Basketball Network, and all over the place. Dick Jerardi. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thanks to our guest today, John Phillips. Really enjoyed talking to him about Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, Darby Dan Farm, and especially the Pittsburgh Pirates. And then Dick Jerardi, handicapping insight, talked a little bit about Horse of the Year, and talked about college basketball. It's all you could want. That's what we do every week here on the Horse Racing Show. Some horses plus.
That's right.
A little bit more.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
And didn't you love the Pittsburgh Pirates stories?
Oh yeah.
Gosh.
I've been into baseball pretty much since I was 5 years old. So
Retired catcher now you are.
yes.
Ben, what position did you play?
I played second base and catcher sometimes.
Scott?
Offensive guard football. I don't know. No baseball.
Oh,
I'm
geez.
sorry, not American, huh?
And you played American football,
I
not that
know.
soccer.
That's all I can
Not
handle.
that
That's right.
stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff. Look at me, Moss, center
Yes.
field.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. But you know what? That's a good thing, and I'm glad that we talk more about that. I think that helps horse racing to open up more to the other sports cultures, as we say. It can't always be about, hey, he worked it in 58 too. Okay, if you follow the sport, you got it. That's fine. There's an understanding. If you don't, relate more to, as I did years ago when I first started covering this, and one of the first guys I met was D. Wayne Lucas, who had just come over from the quarter horse world, an old basketball coach, and he started giving us all this. He gave me a lot of insight, comparing it to like power forwards, point guards, things that I could relate to. That's why I love talking to John about baseball and Dick Jerardi. We've run into each other many times at basketball arenas, almost as many times there as at racetracks. Horse of the Year. Are we all saying it's bricks and mortar?
It's hard to argue against him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Danny, okay. So the
So far.
Academy doesn't have to worry. We'll just give the Eclipse Award to bricks and mortar and call it a day.
You heard it here first,
Yeah.
folks.
Although we're going to be talking about the year in this sport and not always dwelling on, we all know about Santa Anita. We all know about all the things that have happened this year on the bad side. We all know about that long wait for the Kentucky Derby. But the next couple of weeks as we wrap up this year, we're going to look back at some of the moments that are special and some of the people that are not forgotten, but maybe overlooked a little bit. One comes to mind, Mark Casse won 2/3 of the Triple Crown with 2 different horses. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Yeah, so plenty to talk about. All that will be coming ahead. Thank you for tuning in this week. Welcome in everybody at WVOK Lexington, Kentucky as well. For Ben Chaffins, Thomas Kenny, and of course, Scott Hall, I'm Kenny Rice. Talk next week.